Ed Cabellon, who I've talked to many times. I've never met in person, but hopefully we'll correct that this year sometime soon. He's the director.
I thought we were real friends, Jeff, not virtual friends.
Well, I guess we're virtually real friends. But after ACUI, we get to meet in person. So
yes.
He's the director of the Campus Center at Bridgewater State University, I believe, is which houses the Cindy King, who presented here yesterday. And he also does a lot of consulting in the area of social media, and it can be found on Twitter at Ed Cabellon. So, go ahead, Ed.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Or actually, it's good afternoon here in the East Coast, but I guess still good morning for those of you in the Central and other time zones west of us. But I'd like to thank Break Drink and Jeff Jackson for the opportunity to present to all of you today. I'm not sure. I heard some of the names of people who are here, and I know that for some of you this might be a refresher, or it might be new information. But today I'm going to share with you some thoughts on social media and sort of how to get started, and also how to maintain it once you get it going with your organization. You can apply this also to your own personal or professional branding as well, but today I just want to share with you some quick thoughts and some examples as to sort of where I think we can certainly do better as higher ed and student affairs professionals. So with that, some of the learning outcomes that we're going to talk about today include really leveraging social media to build online communities, and that's sort of been my approach since getting into social media. Is it's not just because it's fun, or it's not just because it's interesting to me. It's really my main tool to build communities online. As director of a campus center here at Bridgewater State, our job is to build community, and it is with most of you in student affairs. But how do we use social media to then go online and build those communities as well? Then I'll talk a little bit about the basics and some of the tools that you're all familiar with, but sort of from our perspective here at the Campus Center, from my perspective, and then sort of how do you manage it all. So those are really the things that, as I've traveled the country this year and spoken with colleagues over Twitter or over Facebook, the main questions that I get are surrounding these three things. So that's the focus of today's webinar, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions. If you have anything that you desperately want to ask along the way because you have to go and you can only be here for part of the webinar, then feel free to ask Jeff, and he'll make sure to relay that question to me either through the GoToWebinar software or through Twitter on #BreakDrink. So I wanted to share with you sort of the fact that we're living in a communication revolution at this point. When you think about human history, there's only been 4 other times in human history that a period of time could be classified as a revolution in communication. The first one was really when we looked at the typewriter and how oil-based ink and being able to type out instead of writing out our words and our stories and communication really transformed the way that we were able to do group communication from one to many in a written format or a typed format. A few hundred years later, so that was about 400 years ago, then 200 years later, advancements in telephone communication with the voice over a line or text over a line. So you had the telegraph, too, is really part of this whole version of communication revolution. And then being able to speak to someone live one-to-one over this telephone wire drastically changed the way we were able to talk to each other, and really thought about ways of instantly being able to talk to someone instead of having to write them a letter or type out a letter and then mail it and wait for a response. So that's another time in our human history where we went through a communication revolution. The next phase was about 100 years ago in the 1900s, when we were able to encode media, whether it was pictures or music or moving pictures like video, onto a portable object, whether it was a photograph or an LP or an 8-track or film. That was just a drastic way of how we communicated, again, the one-to-many sort of form of communication, and being able to share ideas and thoughts through those mediums. Then in the early to mid-1900s came along the television and radio, and being able to harness electromagnetic waves to transmit sound, and then sound and video again, transforming the way that we spoke and delivered messages to each other, again, from a one-to-many format. Now, all four of these forms of communications were great for creating conversations from, again, one-to-many, but these weren't great for creating conversation among groups until the Internet came along. And the Internet in itself, initially, if you look at the Web 1.0 sort of philosophy of how the web was first constructed, used a lot of the same similarities, used similar techniques to broadcast one message to a ton of people. And it wasn't until social media came along in the 2000s that native communication for groups really started popping up, and whether it was in an AOL chat room or whether it was in any of these instant messaging platforms where now you could do many-to-many forms of communication, it's really has transformed the way that we all talk with one another. And it also became the mode of transportation for all four of the previous revolutionary communication forms. So we're living in a time right now that we really can't see its implications until further on down the road when we're able to really analyze all of this. When you think about the video gaming, when video games became popular and people were saying, get outside and play with each other in real life versus playing online on video games, or even when television came around. I mean, television for my parents and the greatest generation was an event. I mean, they would gather around after eating dinner and sit around the TV and turn on 1 to 3 channels of things, and it was something that was done together. And so as you think about how social media has definitely transformed the way that we communicate with one another, it's no wonder that a lot of us are struggling with trying to figure out ways of how it fits and how we can apply it to how the things that we're doing in our daily work. So with all these things to think about in social media, it's overwhelming. I mean, where do we start? And for me, whenever I talk with colleagues, it's really talking about, well, what's your plan, and what are you going to do with social media? And when you think about a student affairs social media plan, something that I wrote about in my blog earlier in the summer, there's 4 things that really come out that I think about when I want to get someone in the right frame of mind before they jump into doing any kind of social media work with their department or with their division. The first is, what's your strategy and how you're going to support it. Again, do you have the support up above to try this out? And with my supervisor, Kathy Holbrook, C Holbrook 357 on Twitter, when we first approached her about doing this and wanting to approach and do this sort of work, we did it on a temporary basis. I said, give us 3 months, give us 6 months to try this out and see what kind of community we can build online. If it doesn't work, then we'll stop doing it and we'll try something else. And I think that really gave us an opportunity to really just try it out. And our strategy was really to create the community that we were doing in the campus center and mirror that community online. And our first tools were really Facebook. And we didn't jump into Twitter or blogging or YouTube until we first created the community within Facebook to be able to build upon the other tools that we wanted to then try out. And when we think about support, not only the people who are going to manage it, which I think is the second one, but once you have the institutional support, once you have your staff support, this is something you can't do by yourself. So you need to make sure that you have people around you who are going to support your efforts in this, and that it just can't be you on an island. And whether it's your students helping you, or whether it's your graduate students, or whether it's staff or your support staff, whoever it may be, ironing all those details out before you jump in is going to be important. When you think about management, assigning and delegating the management of content and what type of content you're going to put up there is important to think about as well. That relates back to strategy also. Thinking about who's going to manage these tools on a daily basis, and when I say daily, it's going to be daily, because once you start a conversation, you have to maintain it, and you have to be able to respond back in a timely fashion when people speak to you or speak about you. For me, it's inside a 2 to 3 hour window of response, because other than that, it's going to be hard for other people to take your social media presence seriously if you're not going to be engaged right away in that conversation. So that takes time. It takes people paying attention to it. And whoever is going to be doing that, you need to identify that before you get going. Next thing you have to think about is, what's success going to be for you? And so when you measure when you measure success, what is that going to look like? And I can't tell you what that success is going to be. I can give you shades of what it might look like, but certainly whatever success is going to be defined on your campus is how you define it. Each campus is different. I don't like using the term best practices when it relates to social media because really it's all relative. Best for us could be not best for another organization or division or institution. So defining success ahead of time and understanding what that means is going to be key before you move forward because you won't know if you've done anything unless you have that measuring stick to use later on. So make sure you do that. And finally, thinking about how you're going to brand yourself is going to be important. Most people try to do branding first. They look at, well, how can I use this to market, or how can I use this to create our new brand for whatever department you're a part of. And that's a common misstep or a mistake that I see student affairs offices using it for, because when you engage with social media, that's almost how you are introduced to it, especially from a business or a department perspective. You see people writing, come to our pizza party at 7 o'clock in the lounge, or come to this building for this event, and it's more of an advertising use versus a conversation piece. Facebook for me is not, or social media for me in general, is not a place to advertise initially. It's a place to start conversation and engage the people who you're trying to connect with anyway as part of the planning, as part of the conversation that you're already having within your meetings, within your building, within your organization, so that they feel a part of the process and not just being asked to go or these folks are bombarded now every day with messages, marketing messages, and so the best way to connect with them is to make sure that you've created your community first. And the first three things are important before you even dive into the branding piece. So where to start? For me, if you're talking about 101, you're talking about social media, just getting started, the three things that I would do are those three right there: Facebook, Twitter, and blogging. And the reason I say focus your efforts on there is because that's where most of our communities lie currently. Why recreate the wheel when we know that 90% of our students are on Facebook? I forget what the new statistic is. Almost 600 million users. And so for me, making sure that we have a presence on Facebook first and foremost is where I would start. Making sure that you understand the use of Facebook, which we'll get into in a second, the difference between group pages and fan pages and user pages, and what each bring to the table. From there, you can build it into Twitter and build it into blogging, which again, sort of each is, for me, is an extension of each other. So Facebook is sort of where you start because that's where your students are. But when you get into Twitter, you're now starting to really get into not just the people that you know, but the people that you want to know on Twitter, other colleagues throughout institutions across the country, other similar organizations that may be doing it that you want to connect with to share ideas and get feedback on. That's sort of how we go into Twitter. And then blogging expands the Twitter conversation into a place where you can continue conversation more than 140 characters. So that's how I look at those three tools. And as we started here at the Campus Center, that's how we have done it and continue to do it. So first for me is getting to know Facebook. And for a lot of you, you might think, well, I know how to use Facebook. I'm pretty good at Facebook. I get Facebook. I'm surprised and shocked every time when I meet with people and talk with people about how they really don't. They just sort of know the skimming of the surface and what each section can do. For me, the biggest thing that people don't do on Facebook is create lists. And so my first recommendation to you is if you are someone who is going to use Facebook to connect with students online and create community, you have to take your current connections, and I don't like the word friends just as a point of information. I think that the lexicon of Facebook, friends, privacy, those two words in general do not paint an accurate picture for what Facebook really is trying to do. In Facebook, you're not really friends with all those people. I mean, let's be honest. You may be friends with some, a good portion. But really what you're doing is connecting. I'd rather see them use the term like connections, because I think connections, I mean, they do use it right up here, all connections. But certainly I would say that using listing your connections in these lists will certainly help as you look forward to the evolution of Facebook. I think more and more will leverage the lists function in Facebook to deliver the new services, the new features that Facebook has to offer. Especially when you think about Facebook messaging and mail and how that's going to evolve, it's important that you have sort of classified, and I hate using that word, but classified all your connections in Facebook into groups that, you know, and the nice thing about Facebook is that you can do multiple lists for your connections. So, for example, most of you who I know on Twitter are in my Twitter list, but also those of you on Twitter or in Student Affairs are in my Student Affairs list. And so I've broken it down so that if I want to message that list of people easily, I can do that. When I want to share Bridgewater content, I can share Bridgewater content with whatever groups or lists in Facebook I've created. And so first thing you need to do is make sure that your lists are up to date and that you've done that. And then you can leverage privacy so that you can become quote-unquote friends or connected with your students on Facebook, which for some is still controversial. I know some of my colleagues who just don't want to do that, and they would rather either not connect with their students on Facebook, which I think is a bad idea, or create a professional Facebook page, a secondary one that they manage on top of their personal one that will allow them to message each other or still connect. But if you're able to leverage the privacy settings, which again I think is a bad term, I think it's more about access because there's no such thing as privacy in Facebook, and so sending that message to our students is also an important piece. But making sure that your privacy or access settings in Facebook match sort of the groups, those lists are what leverage your privacy settings, and so being able to know how you can connect with your students on Facebook and then share with them what you would share with them in your real life interactions is sort of how I mirror those in-person and online relationships. And so making sure that that is set is important. And then really making sure your Facebook page is still an accurate account of your life. I mean, it's no longer a reflection of your personal life. Facebook has now become a reflection of your entire life. And so being able to make sure that it's branded. So I don't know if you know that you can, I'm sure most of you do know this already, but if your Facebook.com URL is not personalized yet, you should personalize it. So mine is facebook.com/@Cabellon. If you haven't done that yet, you can just go to facebook.com/username, and within there you can select whatever branded user URL you want to create. And so I would recommend you do that so that it's branded and it's yours and you've taken it. And really, if you want Facebook mail, you're going to have to do that in order to get your Facebook email address that you want as well. Facebook groups, for me, are only to be used for internal communication within a group, a particular group or organization that wants to leverage Facebook for collaboration online. And what I like about the group pages now is that you're able to use the built-in chat function, which for us has been really useful as the Campus Center staff. We have an internal Facebook group for our student employees, and so whenever any of them are online while they're working, which is fine because we ask them to kind of maintain and monitor conversation on Facebook and Twitter, we can chat with them from our desktop almost like an instant message, and that chat goes to the entire group. So we can quickly get a pulse for our student employees for feedback or anything else using the chat feature, which I think is great. But you're able to you know, do internal communication with your group without having to, I mean, some people use this in lieu of Google Docs or other things that you can leverage the Facebook group for. And I'm sure there's tons of other uses that I'm not thinking about for Facebook groups right now. But the nice thing is being able to message members in Facebook mail, and it's not indexed in Google, which is great. So it's really, if there's anything that is quote-unquote private, you can set this to really be only seen by your by the members that you've assigned. So certainly use the group pages for internal communication only, and not to push content out to your general quote-unquote fans. And so that's what takes me to here, our fan page. And for us, again, the number one thing I see, the challenge I see that most folks are having with their fan pages is that A, they're getting caught up with their numbers, which again I would recommend not getting caught up in numbers. Focus on generating good content. And for us, the way we generate content on our fan page is we simply mirror whatever questions we're hearing and whatever conversation we're hearing in person online. So any questions that we may get at the info booth, conversations within the office that we hear our students having with one another, as we walk through the building, anything that we hear that students are talking about, yes, we're sort of eavesdropping in our conversation, but I feel like if they're having those conversations with each other, that's something that maybe someone else would benefit from. So we'll post questions on our Facebook page, and yes, we'll push content out from our blog, and we'll push our class cancellations out. And certainly there are some things that a niche perhaps that you folks in your offices have that students come to your fan page to get that sort of information. But beyond that, that's probably 20-30% of our content. The rest is we try and create conversation whenever we can, using questions and getting that interaction as much as possible. We also, I also recommend that you personalize this page as well if you can. Once you get 25 fans in your fan page, you can then personalize this to match the branding for your organization that you want. So for example, our Facebook URL is facebook.com/BSU Campus Center. So is our Twitter page, and so is our YouTube channel. And so once you decide on what that's going to be, branding it so that it's easier to find for your fans or for people who want to find your content, that's going to be important for you to do. And the Insights package that is part of the fan page analytics is important to share with your VP or your supervisor. That has some really nice information on who's coming, the demographical information of it. So if you're an admin on a fan page, on the left side, if you scroll down a little bit on your fan page, you'll see a button that says Insights. And it should tell you a little bit about what's going on and how often your stuff is being liked and how much comments are happening. Really useful information as you move forward with trying to engage your community. Okay. As I mentioned, Facebook, again, has evolved from a reflection of your personal life to your reflection of your entire life. And that's a message I like sharing with my students, especially because I think as educators, it's our responsibility, especially if we're into social media a lot and we're using it to leverage it for building online communities and to make connections, that our own Facebook pages are good and that we're mindful of what we put up there as our digital footprint and being a good digital citizen. That's a whole other topic for another day. But certainly, when you connect with students on Facebook, I found myself being able to have those conversations because I can see anything that they've allowed me to see. So it's good conversation pieces as well. Next thing I would say is once you feel that you've gotten the Facebook page down and you're creating conversation on it, now you can move to Twitter. And part of the need to go to Twitter now is because I think that there will be a tipping point soon. I really believe that a lot of our students are really starting to go to Twitter, use Twitter more. The more mainstream it becomes, again with advertisements, mainstream media having not only their Facebook page but their Twitter page up as they talk about ways to connect with them. I think more and more students will just figure out ways to get on it and learn how to use it for themselves personally. And so when you think about creating a department account, again, talking about who's going to use it, who's going to manage it, making sure that the bio here reflects who's managing it so that there's accountability for who's tweeting. There's a lot of ways people use the Twitter account. Some of them will repurpose their Facebook content. Some of them will just use it as an information sharing piece for the university or for your college or for your department, which is all well and good. But again, how do you create conversation on Twitter is going to be important. And the best ways I've seen that is through hashtag development. Currently at Bridgewater, we're starting a conversation about leadership, and so we created BSU Leads to sort of start that campus conversation on creating a new leadership initiative here at the institution that Cindy's leading, actually. And then BSU Life with our general campus conversations that we're having. That's how we've really found ways to connect with folks. And it's been really great to find other people who we normally wouldn't think were on Twitter, and when they use the hashtag or when we look at it as a possible conversation piece, it's great to be able to make those connections. Or with other departments, actually, we found some departments that have started using Twitter, and we didn't know they used Twitter until they started tweeting. So that's one way of using Twitter. We also use the search engine within Twitter to make sure that anyone who's tweeting Bridgewater State or Bridgewater State University or BSU, that we have a running search going in Hootsuite. We still use Hootsuite, even though you have to pay for it now. That you can use TweetDeck, I guess, now. That's still free, right? To figure out who's talking about the institution or your brand or whatever, and connect with them as well. So for us, it's just maintaining an authentic voice. Retweeting folks whenever we can, sharing content, whether it's blog content or other student content or organization content. With Facebook as well, we use Twitter to be a connector and try to make sure that we are connecting people in brands and departments together through Twitter. So it's important that you don't take this on until you really have a handle on Facebook, and that's really been my advice for most people. Most people do both at the same time, which if you can handle it, great. But unless you've really been on Twitter for a while and you get it personally, which again I would recommend you doing too, I would never recommend anyone to run a department account without running a personal account first, because it's hard to get the nuances and understand the language of Twitter without you using it for yourself first. Some people try it, and kudos to them if they can figure it out. The reason we didn't jump into this was because I wanted to figure out for myself how to use it before I then had a department representing our institution, whatever we're sending out from here. So, and again, don't get so caught up with followers. And for me, it's more important to create lists like we do in Facebook as a way to connect people with the different types of groups that we have found anyway, whether it's we have perspectives, we have other campus center or student unions out there. We have students who are bloggers that we put in one group, alumni, local businesses, students. We have all sorts of lists that we try to create to help people easily connect with each other. So that's Twitter. Oops. Oh, okay. So some of you may have already seen this story, and I like sharing it when I talk about Twitter because it's an important story to share. I wrote about this last August on the essay blog, but my interest in Twitter really happened once I was able to connect with students on it, and this story really, I think, paints a good picture. It was orientation last year, and I was looking and listening at the Bridgewater State and BSC at the time search list that I created in Hootsuite, and all of a sudden I came across this tweet. It was a first-year commuter student who said, "Surprise, surprise, the BSC bookstore also sucks." They didn't even have all my books, and the lady was all annoyed by me. Well, I read that, and of course, if I heard this in person, I would turn around, or I would stop what I was doing and say, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry you had that experience. What can I do to help?" The student affairs in me would want to help that student. So of course, digitally, what I did was start following her on Twitter with my account and with in the Campus Center account. And of course, her next tweet within a minute later was, "LOL, 2 official BSC followers Twitters are following me. I wonder if they might notice how much I trash talk to school." Well, of course I did. That's why I'm following you now. And I sent her a direct message within Twitter and said, yeah, I am, and then I sent a public message through our Campus Center account that said, "Yep, totally, it's okay, no worries, great blog, by the way." When I looked at her Twitter account, I noticed that she had linked her blog to her bio, and so I looked at it. It was nice, she did a good job, and so I just wanted to make sure that she knew that I wasn't just auto-responding, but that I had done a little bit of research by reading her bio and reading her blog quickly. Well, wouldn't you know it, in the next 5 minutes, I get another tweet saying, "Whoa, I just gained 10,000 respect points for BSC, thank you. And forget anything I ever said bad about BSC, they DM me and claimed I've read my blog, feeling much better about the school now." So taking time on Twitter to look, listen, and respond appropriately helped change the attitude and the opinion of the institution for this one student, who was a commuter, who I know, being a mainly commuter campus, sometimes they fall through the cracks because they just aren't in our campuses. They aren't in our buildings every day, or they may only be on campus a certain amount of time a week, and so we miss out on opportunities to connect. Well, this student probably didn't think anyone was listening, and that's sort of like the mantra I share with students now. It's like, people listen when you tweet. People listen when you send things on Facebook or when you blog. So be mindful of what you're putting out there. And so for this one student that I caught, I'm sure I've missed a ton. But if we're not engaged on Twitter and listening at least, we're missing out on opportunities to connect with our students and with staff and alumni and whoever else happens to be tweeting about us. So, I encourage you to be an active contributor and begin more two-way conversations. Are you still a one-way contributor in social media? In other words, are you still just are you doing one-to-many versions of communication where you're just blasting information out, using it for marketing, if you will? Or are you trying to create more two-way conversations and getting people to interact with you? The blog for us was a natural evolution from Twitter because as we tweeted, we wanted to say more. And so we created a blog with a strong student voice. I hired students, and some were work study, some weren't, but it was a cross-section of current students at Bridgewater who already were blogging. I found them through Twitter. They all had their own blogs, and so it all made sense to me to ask them to give them opportunities to start our new Campus Center blog. And what we found is that in the spring, we only averaged, I'm thinking probably around 300 views a month. If I look back at my analytics, I think that's what it said. Now, this fall, we've averaged 3,000 views a month, and part of the change for us was instead of just blogging once a week or once every other week with a small staff, we increased our staff to 4 students with a student manager, and we blog Monday through Thursdays every day. and there'll be some Fridays where we'll do a recap post of some of the things that were talked about that week or other blog posts that may not have gotten a lot of traffic. But what we found is that when you're consistent in your writing schedule, we get people looking at our stuff, which I thought was great. And our blog is really a reflection or a continuing conversation of what's happening in the Campus Center. So it's a cross-section of all sorts of topics. Some of them are advice topics from student to student. Some are perspective. Some are informational. But really it's to try and give the prospective student, the current student, or the alumni or the community member a flavor of what it is like to be at Bridgewater. And what we've done is make sure that we have a consistency in our schedule. We keep our posts to about 750 words or less, and we always close with a question is try and start conversation here. And it's been a huge success for us. Getting 3,000 views a month is nothing to shake a stick at, and I'm so excited and proud of my students for what they're doing. And again, it just expands that conversation that we're already having in person. We're just doing it online. So that's our blog. The communities that you wish to build are already there, and we know this through just our own interactions with people on Facebook. And our job is really to bring them together, and we do that already through the work we do in person. We just got to figure out what the best way is to mirror that work in these online communities. So just some quick ideas that people who have asked me to share. So here's some ideas. Scavenger hunts on Facebook and Twitter are great. I know that Scavenger, SCVNGR, is a company that's doing some great work in that area also. But if you don't have funds to have them run that service for you, these are ways that through Facebook and Twitter we've done it. Cindy's done a great job in her department for running these type of contests. Really, really fun and innovative and creative ways. If you also do Facebook Places or any other location-based check-in system as well as part of this, whether it's through Foursquare or Facebook Places, that adds a new layer of fun as well if you can get that to work with it. We've tweeted from weekly meetings, so instead of your SGA just having a closed meeting where no one else can be there, or if it's open or whatnot, have your secretary or whoever is taking minutes also tweet from the meeting any questions or any conversation pieces that are happening, and create a campus hashtag for that conversation so that people can feel like they're part of that meeting. It could be SGA, it could be your programming board, it could be your hall government, it could be really anything. Your department meetings, if you feel so bold. Uploading photos, asking people to tag themselves on your Facebook fan page is huge. Blogging as a reflective tool for conferences and other leadership experiences have been very popular here as well. And as I mentioned, creating campus hashtags or other hashtags that will create a sustained conversation that you can refer back to. Much like SA Chat, much like break drink for this conference, being able to have a threaded conversation that can continue will be important for you to sustain that online interaction. So to close out, we're going to talk a little bit about management. first step is thinking about who's going to be responsible for this. So if it's going to be you or a designee in your department, that's fine. But then really identifying who of these people is going to help you with all that. And it might be maybe 1 or 2 people, it might be 3 people, or it might be 4, however many you want to involve. I would say the more people that you can manage, the better. And that's going to really be depending on your own personality and your own level of time that you're going to be able to give. And the time initially is going to be more than the time as you keep going. Now for us it's more maintenance than it is management, because our staff know what to do. They understand their role and they understand how to get this stuff going. In the beginning, it was more work to train and to sort of make sure people understood the technology, understood its capabilities, its limitations, etc. This slide is a little old now because Hootsuite is no longer free, although you can use it if it's just you, but I know that the expanded levels of Hootsuite are going to cost you some money. If your department can afford to do it, then I would say purchase a pro account for Hootsuite. Otherwise, looking at ways through TweetDeck or other scheduling software out there that can schedule your tweets is a way that I know we've found it to be helpful to schedule the web 1.0 type of communication that we do. That's the stuff that we schedule, whether it's announcing events or starting conversations about certain things we know are happening that week in the life of the institution. There's tons of things you can do, and if you look here, these are all the things that I get to manage. But you can schedule them and then set it and forget it for all intents and purposes, so that you can focus on really on reading and participating in the conversation that's already happening in front of you. Analyzing your insights and web statistics are also going to be important. Understanding again who's liking you and how much interactions are taking place. It's extremely important in understanding what content has been getting liked, what content has been drawing conversation, and trying to duplicate that or stem from those types of conversations to make more conversation happen. This should give you insights, quote unquote, as to what is working for you. For our blog, we look at our traffic through Google Analytics and through our server analytics as well. And we realized through spikes in traffic and through the numbers that most people are on our blog at 7:30 in the morning, 11:30 in the morning, and about 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock too. And so we know that we will be doing a lot of conversations, tweeting, Facebook posts during those times because we know they're already there and they're already reading the content. And so using the data to help, if you're going to use it for marketing, use it for target marketing. We think it's important for, to really take time to look at that. And this stuff is the nerd in me. This is the fun stuff. I get to look at sort of how this data can help us be better in this online community. So if you're not already doing that, take the time to analyze it, make recommendations and make those changes you need to do in order to push it forward. Here are some things that if you want to know if you're doing it well, this is another question someone had sent me a while ago, and so I just put a slide together for it in case I was presenting on this topic, and lo and behold, here it is. If you work with organizations, students, or a department, these are some of the things that I have noticed common ground, trends, things that are common denominators with those organizations or departments. If you're dealing with volunteers, making sure that the volunteers are trained and that they are confident in their abilities to make things happen is important, and that they understand and they're mindful on how to use it personally. There's a direct correlation in my mind. I have no scientific data to back this up. Maybe I got to talk to my buddy Ray Hunko about this. But I think there's a direct correlation to when you're an expert, or not an expert, but when you're proficient and know how to use it personally, you are going to be so much more better off using it professionally or for a brand or for a department, because you've already gone through the growing pains of learning what it takes to be successful or to make good connections and build community when you've done it yourself. That also is translated in the amount of people who create content for you as well. So those are some of the common ground things I've seen for students and volunteers. As departments, it's important to understand that you're paid to represent the institution. So whether you have informal or formal approval to do this, understand that, I mean, for me, I understand that even though if I leave Bridgewater at whatever time I leave at the end of my work day, I still represent Bridgewater when I'm talking to friends or family or other people. When I say I work for Bridgewater State, I'm still representing myself and the institution, even though I'm off the clock, quote unquote. So understanding that whatever you say, you're going to need to defend why you did that and why you tweeted that or why you posted that on Facebook. Understanding that mindset is important as you create content online. I also know that it's important to involve a small group of staff, including graduate staff and paid student employees to manage it if you can afford to do that. Some departments require volunteers to make that work, and that's fine as well. Again, they need the proper training, and they need to be proficient in it personally before they can really be given the keys to that car to drive it. So, and the last thing I would say is, as a department, if you are serving as more of a connector and a promoter of other people's content, that's when really I've seen magic happen, because that really builds your woofie, that really builds your online street cred, if you will, that you're not just pushing your own content out there, but you're promoting other people's stuff. That's important as well as you look at the content you created online. In Facebook comments, other people tagging your organization in their status updates is important. And when other people are posting on your wall, that's very good. In Twitter, the more @mentions you have, if your organization tweets are being retweeted, and making sure you respond to all the @mentions in a timely fashion is so key. These are just some things, some common ground threads that I've seen as I look at people's online presence, that I can see that they're doing it pretty well. Oh, and for blogs, about 100 views I think is great. Some people might say that's little, some people might say that's a lot. I just think 100 views, if you can get 100 views in a post, I think it's great. Building on top of that is comments, and that we struggle with that. It's hard for people. We get very few comments on our blog. We're trying to get better at that. So, a few thoughts on what's next. I think video content, whether it's live or recorded, is going to be really a wave of student affairs future. I see ourselves in student affairs broadcasting events over Ustream or YouTube or Justin TV or whatever service you want to use, so that people feel like they're there. Some institutions have already done that with major success. And so while there might be some I don't know, policy or procedural things you have to deal with, if you can get on that and learn how to do that well, I think you'd be well ahead of the curve. I don't think location-based service information and software are going away. I think really being creative and learning how to use that, whether it's for scavenger hunts or whether it's for giveaways for checking into your office or your institution or your department, leveraging it for maybe a self-guided tour. I mean, I've seen some really creative things with location-based services. I think student affairs is going to have to lead the way again and figure out the best practices or recommended practices for that area. And thinking about mobile web and app integration for your own department, for your own institution, where are you and your organization at with all of that? And so just thinking about that, I think, is what's coming on the horizon, and frankly, some of it's already here. Okay. So, how are we doing? What questions do you got? I just went through a lot of stuff. Hopefully it helped a little bit.
The first question is, how did you become so awesome?
How? I learned by watching you, Jeff.
Oh, nice hookup. And I may have accidentally, inadvertently deleted a question. So if you asked a question in the last 10 minutes on your, go ahead and type it back in there, because I want to make sure I get it. There is a real question is, how much is a pro account for Hootsuite?
I believe it's $6 or $7 a month. I off the top of my head, I don't know. I recently just upgraded, and I can look. Hold on.
Yeah.
What is it? Let me Google that for you. What is that site, Jeff?
Yeah, let me Google, or whatever the acronym for. Let me Google that.
I think if you just search, if you go to Hootsuite.com right now, the plans show up right away. It says Basic, Pro, and I think you can, and then for every user that you assign, like you can in Hootsuite, you can create community managers that can also tweet on your behalf without giving them the password. The benefit of using a service like Hootsuite is that you don't have to give your password to them. You give them access through Hootsuite, and then they just do everything through there.
And doesn't CodeTweet do something similar to that?
CoTweet does do something similar, and TweetDeck I don't think has that functionality. I know that you can schedule tweets yourself, but I think in TweetDeck you still need to install it and still need to have the passwords to be able to do it from your computer. Which, I mean, if you want to go through that work and do that with each of your community managers or your social media managers, then you could do that and just create it and do it on there for them. But I was disappointed in Hootsuite for having to do having to charge. I thought what they were doing was great. I mean, I understand why they did it, but it's disappointing nonetheless. So.
Yeah, I haven't gone back to them yet. I'm sure I'll forget them eventually, though. What advice do you have for professionals who need to get all the social media cleared through their communication office?
That's challenging, Jeff. I have spoken to a number of colleagues who their hands are tied. They work at an institution that all public communication that is related in any way or has the name of the institution on it has to be cleared. I mean, for me, my advice in what I have done here at Bridgewater is I've just become really good friends and colleagues with those people. I've taken them to lunch, asked them for their philosophy on why the institution's policy is like that, and really try to give them education that this is not something that they can control. This is an organic, for as much as we try to frame it, and for as much as we try to plan it out, a lot of this, the best uses of this has been organic, and people using it, going with it, and seeing sort of what type of community response you get. And so while I know that some of you will have your hands tied and there's nothing I can tell you that will be able to fix that problem, what you have control over is building those relationships with those people and trying to show them other institutions that are using it well and showing them how, again, giving them the opportunity to say, look, give us 3 months, give us a month, give you a time period to try it out. And if they're not comfortable with anything that you or your team puts out there for content, then have it taken down. Or I just think that having to clear every piece of every tweet or every post or everything that you're going to do is counterintuitive to what you're really trying to create online. So for most of my colleagues, the best advice I've told them is just to go and try and build that relationship and share with them other colleagues, institutions, and the things that you've seen that, sister institutions or brother institutions that are doing it well oftentimes may be the tipping point to say, oh, well, I didn't know that so-and-so institution was doing that. Maybe we should be doing that. Because a lot of times people want to be like Joneses and do what they're doing. So,
and a similar question is, how do you encourage student affairs professionals to discuss a social media game plan with their supervisors who may not be as social media savvy?
Cindy and I had this conversation recently where we were frustrated at colleagues here and not at Bridgewater, this attitude of, oh, social media again, why do we have to talk about this, or why does this continue to come up? And it's almost like this frustration of, it keeps coming up, and how do you get that conversation started and not beyond we already know what we're doing with this, or we don't need to do that sort of thing. And in any of our departments or professional associations, we have standards, don't we not? Whether it's CAS or whether it's in ACOI, it's our core competencies. And so we are expected, I'm assuming, that we are supposed to be proficient in each of those standards. And those include communication, diversity, social justice, things that if you were to respond the way you respond to social media, you'd be looked at crazy. Like, what do you mean? Like, if you respond in the same way, like, replace social media with diversity. Replace social media with another competency that you're expected to know about. And frame it in a way that I'm expected as a student affairs professional to understand and learn this type of communication. Share with them the idea that we're in the middle of a revolution of communication, that we're expected, because our students live in this realm, to understand. And so my advice would be to write up a plan unsolicited from your supervisor, highlighting examples from other institutions where you've seen it to work. Use Twitter examples or SA Chat examples. Cite whatever you can from other institutions, and in your next one-on-one with your supervisor, sit down and say, I have an idea and a plan that I think might work for our institution, for our office, and start small. Start with Facebook. Start with I don't know, anything that you feel like would get a sort of a response. And there will be some of you out there who won't be able to break through, unfortunately, because of the type of supervisor that you have who just is not supportive of this stuff. And unfortunately, that is something that until they're willing, and I mean, you can try and go over their head if you want, but I don't think it's a good idea. What I would say is connect with your students as much as you can through Facebook, if that's something that you can do. So I know some colleagues whose supervisors and institutes frown upon that too. So it's frustrating because even if you wanted to connect with your students on Facebook, you're frowned upon it because of the perception. And I just think that the lexicon of Facebook needs to change in order for us to move past this conversation. Because you hear the word friend, you automatically think, oh, why are you friends with your students? And it's not a good way to describe what we do. We connect with our students on Facebook. We have access settings in Facebook. And so replacing those two words alone may be able to move your conversation forward, because if that's the definitions that we're using and the framework at which people are understanding these social media tools as social versus professional, or understanding that that term friend is not accurate, I think those are the sub-conversations that you need to have before moving into here's the plan, here's what we want to do. It's not an easy answer because all of us experience it differently depending on who we have as supervisors and where we're at in our institutions. But it's safe to say that this is definitely not going away, and it's only going to get more complicated and different as we move into 2011, as we move to 2012. The future iterations of this is going to be dependent upon you getting an understanding and a good acumen on understanding what's happening now.
All right. And last question, we're running a little bit over, but last question is, where did you find all these cool graphics for the presentation?
I did a Creative Commons search, and I did Google Images. There's tons of great Google Images and stuff out there that's free and unlicensed, and a lot of them have to, if you type in social media or branding or images related to those, a lot of these will pop up. So I can share with the group the links to all these if you want, if it helps after. So
great. Ed, thank you for joining us, and you are at